Dear futurists, here at the Future Studio, we try to give you a glimpse of what tomorrow will bring. My name is Lars, and in this podcast, we're talking with Erwin, the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, on their belief in the next generation and how everybody can tackle all the challenges that are currently ahead of us. The Port of Antwerp didn't just happen, by the way. It's always been a place of renewal and innovation. And together with our partner of the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, I would like to welcome our guests who will talk us through the port and its future. Erwin Verstraelen, CDIO of the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. Hi, Erwin. Welcome to our studio. How are you?
I'm fine, Lars. Thanks.
That sounds perfect. Maybe let's jump right into it. I think that a lot of our listeners know the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, right? It's Antwerp-Bruges now, by the way, on which we will come back later. But I can imagine that we will talk about innovation in the port specifically.
Yeah, we will.
And that it's hard to imagine sometimes for people what the exact innovation is that they're talking about. It's sometimes far away from their bed. So let's start at the very beginning, maybe for you, so people can get to know you a little bit. Mm-hmm. Maybe as an opening question, can you enlighten us about your past, about what the path that you had towards becoming the CDIO at the Port of Antwerp-Bruges? What did you study? Where did you study? And what things did you do after you studied towards this?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a long journey. So I studied in Antwerp. I'm a maritime transport economist by training, and then also on top of that an MBA. And then later in my career, did a masterclass in information security management from the Antwerp Management School. So all my degrees are born and made in Antwerp.
Native in Antwerp.
Native in Antwerp. Then I started at what is currently known KBC Bank, but I started when it was still Kredietbank that merged with ABB Insurance and Sera Bank, where I was part of the internal consulting department, facilitating all kinds of transition projects. Also the expansion of KBC Bank abroad in Hungary, Poland, and so on at the time. But because I was at that time 25, 26, and that was the moment the internet exploded and email and so on. And the bank said, yeah, you're a young guy, do something with it because we don't understand why the hell we need that. I still remember that one of the board members said, internet will make we will make a website, but we're never going to do something transactional over the internet. Email was for the happy few and all that kind of stuff. So you see history repeating itself in terms of the initial reaction to a technology and what the hell should we do with that? And then later on, it's obvious that it is part of everybody's life. So I created the first intranet, and the company I brought on board, a startup. That's the one I joined at the end of the 90s. Worked there for 7 years, then moved to IBM to be part of the strategy and change community, because in the meantime I had felt that I had a passion and also maybe a little bit of a talent for aligning business and IT. So I did a lot of IT strategy studies for C-level, board level, and understanding, okay, what is the path forward with IT in this company in support of strategic goals and so on. As part of that, I also worked abroad, spent time in Saudi Arabia, Kenya, South Africa, what have you. But one of the clients I worked for was the group Arvesta, formerly known as the group AVV. And in 2011, at the age of 41, I became the first CIO of the company. So it's a group of 30 companies driving an IT-driven business transformation. So 30 companies that had operated more or less in isolation, had to move into corporate IT systems, standardized processes, and so on, which is, of course, a very big change thing, because you take away some responsibilities of the local managers.
The old culture.
Throw overboard the old culture, a new vision for the company. So that's always that's not an IT thing only, but okay. And then in 2017, I was headhunted to become the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer of the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. That was a new position in the executive committee because the new CEO had arrived 11 months prior. And he said, okay, if I look at how the port is going to evolve, it's going to be digital or there won't be any port. So I need somebody at strategic level takes ownership of that. Little did they know that I had 4 generations of maritime blood running through my veins. So it was for me actually coming home in the destination I was made for, So, and that's 5.5 years ago.
And now still here?
Still here, still happy as a kitten, still enjoying this wonderful innovation platform, which a port is, but you will address that later on, I guess.
For sure. All right, we've done some digging, and I've also found that we have been together as a partnership. The Port of Antwerp-Bruges and Sync have been together as a partnership for
Also
5 years now.
yeah, since the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been an insane journey we've been on. We've grown from 800 participants 5 years ago to more than 2,000 last year, for example. And every step along the way, you've been with us. But as you noticed, the last edition really kicked it off.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of ideas in the work, but I really wanted to grab this moment to announce something together, right? Because since the start of the year, we're transforming our partnership and your endless support and trust over the past years into a main strategic partnership. How do you look back at these 5 years personally? Firstly, maybe?
Well, first of all, the conclusion is that we have a nose for talent, because it sounded really good what you wanted to do. It had for sure also our sympathy in terms of students and alumni setting up an event around entrepreneurship. That already resonates pretty well from our perspective. But to see how it grew and actually became really something professional, as I have also felt during the preparation, it's something that makes us very happy. And last year I was at the event itself. I was blown away, first of all, by the quality of the speakers, the panel conversations, the fact that at 9 o'clock in the evening there were still 700 people in the room. That's dedication, that's passion. You felt something there that was really inspirational. And of course, yeah, entrepreneurship is key in any kind of society. So if that's from, let's say, a very early age on, at the beginning of a career that is being motivated, facilitated, for sure that helps. And of course, the last 5 years in the entire startup sphere, that really kicked off things. Now we're in a different time frame, but then entrepreneurship is even more important. Let's say the party is over, but the real work has to start now. So making clear to young people starting a professional career that entrepreneurship is going to be essential in everything they do. It's not the wait and see mentality that's deadly. So that's for sure something why we continue to be part of your journey as well.
And so I just have to ask, what does a partnership currently mean to you? Why do you still know why did we start this exactly? Why was it interesting to you personally?
Well, for me personally, because I'm also, because of my role, I want to build stuff, and what we try to achieve in terms of all kinds of innovative technology, that's entrepreneurship 100%, because you're starting on a journey where often the technology isn't ready yet, where you have to build coalitions, where you have to find a business model, where you have to motivate a legislator. That's being an entrepreneur. It's not an easy path where I'm starting here, I'm going to go to Z, and it's a straight line. It's 99% of the time it's not a straight line, and all kinds of setbacks and disappointments and things you would have thought would go pretty smoothly. Well, apparently they don't. There's a lot of psychology involved, a lot of motivation, etc., keeping a team on board, because you're working on something with an end goal maybe 2 to 3 years into the future. Yeah, that's entrepreneurship. So, and we need all kinds of people who are also in that mindset to do what we want to do and to achieve where we want to go. So that's why we want to motivate that there is some breeding ground for entrepreneurship, together with initiatives like IoT ecosystems like the Beacon, our strategic partnership with the university, other innovation hubs like the Maritime Campus or Blue Gate Blue app, so that Antwerp becomes an innovation district where you have innovation hubs that reinforce one another and are also fertile ground for entrepreneurs to start up a business or to do stuff, whether you're an entrepreneur within a company or you create your own company, okay, that's a choice you make. But for sure that it is that you are inspired by entrepreneurship. And of course, as the economic powerhouse of the country, 160,000 jobs, 21 billion euros of added value, we need an inflow of entrepreneurial people to make sure we can continue to grow and achieve the goals we want to achieve.
Yeah, for sure. Because maybe you didn't start up something yourself, but you saw entrepreneurship from a lot of different angles. that you really got to see what entrepreneurship could do beyond just starting up these small startups.
Yeah, I didn't start up anything yet. There's always an opportunity.
There is an opportunity, maybe.
In my head, there are a couple of things. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But and at the same time, I'm also assisting startups and scale-ups to get their boots on the ground to grow as a company. We'll talk about a few examples later on.
Okay.
I was a co-founder for the Beacon, so I was part of the board for a couple of years until everything was settled, and then I gave it to somebody else in my team. And I'm also part of an investment fund from the University of Antwerp to basically get IP into spin-offs. So as part of seed funding that enables these companies to get the first track record.
Yeah.
And okay, that's and assisting these companies, being there to guide them and to provide them with feedback is also part of entrepreneurship.
For sure. Maybe a little bit about the next generation. Even during COVID in 2021, you've stood along our sides and still give perspective to the next generation. Why is the port so invested in supporting that next generation specifically?
Well, the next generation, the current generation, I think the challenges we all face on a global level require all talent to come on board towards a common project. But I understand that for the younger generation, what is happening right now can be really daunting, and it could result in a reaction, oh my God, let's hide under the table and see what happens. Well, that's the least thing you should do. The thing is, every challenge is an opportunity at the same time. It's all in the head, in the mindset. And so I think we are morally obligated to be positive about the future. In every time frame, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. That was when Russia and the US were still in a sort of a Cold War mode.
The oil crisis in the
oil
80s.
crisis. In every decade, you have these events that shape global history, where you reflect on it 20 years later and say, oh my God. What is often forgotten, if you look back, how that felt at the moment in time. When I was a teenager, it wasn't that much big fun if you looked at what could happen anytime. There was that threat of a nuclear war, but still it didn't happen, and we progressed and so on. And the 90s was much more of a fun decade. Well, the second part, the first part, not at all.
Not so much.
Then you had the dot-com crash, then you had 9/11, then you had this and that. But in every decade, you have these kind of events. And you have to put them in a global perspective and not say, "Ooh, this is really something that makes me afraid." Well, being afraid doesn't help. You see, and we have to make sure that, given all the opportunities that we have, the fact that we are globally connected, that we have all the technology we need for the foreseeable future, to get your hands out of your sleeves and get going and see the opportunity. Because a person that thinks in terms of problems has basically shut down his brain and says, well, you figure it out because I can't. But seeing it as an opportunity, that triggers creativity,
Yeah. You've really put into the positive impacts a lot of these changes and however quickly they have made. Is there any sort of advice that you can bring it down to that you could give from all of those years that you have your experience to that next generation?
Well, I have a self-made quote in life.
Okay.
And it's as follows. In life, there are problems, challenges, and opportunities. And in fact, that's 3 times the same thing, only the mindset is different.
Okay.
Well, try to live according to that rule. If you're faced with a problem, step back and ask yourself the question, what's the opportunity behind the problem? And more often than not, you're surprised how fast you see the opportunity behind the problem. But it triggers a completely different mindset that is more focused on getting things done instead of saying, well, there's a problem. Yeah, okay, so. Also, in my team, if somebody comes to me and says, I have a problem, I say, yeah, and?
What now? Yeah.
And now, because I pay you to solve problems, not to tell me that there's a problem, otherwise I can do it for you. But if you say, I have a problem, but I think I see 3 opportunities to solve the problem, can you reflect with me on what is the most likely best option to go forward? Then we have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Because at the end, you're still the master of your own destiny, right?
That's a very positive way to look at it, instead of passively looking at everything that is happening.
Yeah, and have an opinion about it on top of that.
For sure.
That's even worse.
It's no secret that we want to innovate. We want everyone to be on board, of course, young and old. So how can we foster creative energy and innovation in the next generation? And how can you encourage them to sort of start thinking out of the box?
Yeah, well, I think for a younger generation, what is really, really key driver in being motivated to innovate is the purpose. What's the purpose of innovation? And I think that this generation sets itself apart in a very positive way about, okay, if I'm part of something, what's the bigger purpose? What's the societal impact? I like that a lot because that's the road into a sustainable future. If it's just all about money and me, that's not going to last very long. Actually, from an historical perspective, you see what the result of that was. And you get a bank collapse and all that kind of stuff because there were too many people, too selfish and only looking at themselves. So if we want to really go to that sustainable world, which is the end state for, let's say, the metaphor for all the problems or the challenges we have and turn them into opportunities, then we have to find a much more balanced way of looking at things, long-term view instead of short-term view, and the purpose, let's say, the maximum impact for all. And I see that much more reflected in the younger generation than in previous ones. And that is something that, for sure, is a driver, I guess, in keeping people motivated to innovate and to be entrepreneurial.
To keep the perspective on the things.
The perspective, because it's a long journey. It won't happen overnight. And it will need a lot of effort and a lot of failure and a lot of setbacks. But if you keep yourself focused on the end state, that's also basically sort of the red line running through my keynote during Sync, then that is a very powerful lever to get where you want to go.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe to make it a bit more concrete, we could talk about the innovation that is happening within the port currently. We can all agree that we need a lot of young, bright minds to help us face the challenges of tomorrow. I've done some digging also at the Port of Antwerp alone. Without Bruges equals 16,900 football fields. And last week you posted that there were more than 80,000 employees currently active in the Port of Antwerp. It means that also those numbers are keeping coming. So I can imagine that such a large region where so much is happening and evolving, that comes with a lot of challenges for the future especially, right?
Yeah. So it's 60,000 direct jobs and 80,000 indirect jobs. So overall 140,000. And what you said, the football fields, there's another metaphor. You can take the entire city of Antwerp in between a highway, and you can put that 6 times into the port. That's 120 square kilometers. And with Bruges, we have added another 41. So it's 160 square kilometers of land that you have to operate. So from an innovation perspective, if you want to focus on that, the idea is to transform that entire port area into a smart port. A smart port where, if you look at let's say, the foundational pillars on which that definition of a smart port rests, you have integrated logistics operation, and integration means that you have a lot of data sharing and harmonized process and so on, that you're able to shift from one modal transportation mode to another very fast, that you limit your impact on ecology and climate, that you build on a digital talent pool that is able to build all these things, and that also you take cybersecurity very seriously, because that's the flip side of digitization. That's a threat. And since 2019, we are part of the critical infrastructure. Now that's at the macro level. If I look at the Port Authority for which I work, there the metaphor is that we want to create a digital nervous system on top of the physical port that allows us, mimicking the human senses, to hear, smell, touch, and so on, what is taking place in the port the moment it happens, but aided by sensors, drones, smart cameras, and so on, and bring all that data into a digital twin so that somebody sitting at a control center is notified, oh, something is happening. Because in 120 square kilometers, you can't put a human being at every corner of every street.
Exactly.
And that doing that 24/7. So we bring that information via smart technologies to the people and say, okay, if you combine this data and that data of a sensor and wind speed, wind direction, and a sensor, then we assume something is happening over there. So turn a camera and look at there, and then send somebody to that spot if that is needed.
So we
bring everything to the people from our team responsible for nautical traffic management, environmental asset management, and so on. So instead of them just driving around, walking around, and that allows us to understand 24/7, every second of every minute of every day what is taking place.
Yeah. How would you maybe see the next generation in this sort of framework? Do we need the young entrepreneurial people mostly to have these sort of challenges, and how do you specifically see
Well, they
that
have
for them?
because they have an open mind on all these things. That's typically human. That if you're part of a company or a setting, that after a while you think alongside it. If you're new, you have a more outside-in view. Now, of course, you can retrain yourself. I'm not saying that old people, whatever the definition of old people is, because you don't have to look at me. Age is a mindset, by the
Exactly.
way. Age is a state of mind.
It's just a number.
You have people of 20 who are old, and you have people of 85 who are young. So it's in the head. Okay, if you're a little bit lucky with the physical part, but nevertheless, and that's also something you have to work on. It doesn't happen by magic. But it's not just the young people versus, it's the blend. That I think that's the most valuable thing, because young people, they don't have the experience that somebody older has, and somebody older might immediately reflect in terms of, okay, we have done that or we haven't done that. And certainly in an age where technology is evolving at an exponential rate, saying we tried it in the past, it didn't work, we're not going to do it again, can be extremely dangerous. It can even kill you, because technology in the meantime evolved. And I have a very good example of that. 2 years ago, we did an experiment to transform speech into text. So in maritime communication, it's radio communication, speech. But using an algorithm, AI platforms, we wanted to translate that speech into a text so that you could query it, and that we could also do sentiment analysis. So we want to understand if there was an emotion in a conversation between two human beings, because then it would be interesting from the nautical management perspective to tap in and say, is something happening? 2 years ago, the result of that translation from speech into text was babblefish. It was completely nonsense. The algorithm was not capable of capturing what was being said in either in Dutch or in English or a mix of that and so on. We did it again a month ago using the OpenAI platform, commonly known from ChatGPT and DALL-E and so on. It was 96% spot on. So in less than 2 years' time, that same audio fragment was from completely useless into something we now can embed as part of use cases we have in our mind to actually use that data as a data source, voice as a data source in understanding what is taking place in the port. So saying we tried it in the past, didn't work, not going to do it again, no. So we have ongoing experiments where we have data sets and we try it again in 6 months, we try it again in 12 months, we try it again in 18 months, and we know eventually it will work. It's just a question of time. And another, in 2007, when I was sitting in my living room and my daughter of 5 passed me by with an iPad talking to a friend using FaceTime or whatever, I said, I've seen that before as part of Star Trek in the 1970s. Yeah. So what was science fiction in the 70s is a consumer device 20 years later, and your daughter runs around with it in the living room.
Yeah.
Okay?
And it happens before you know it's happening.
And it happens before you know it. And then you're wondering what the hell should you do with an iPad? Yeah, okay, a year later everybody says, how was I able to do something without an iPad? And that is something, if you have been around for, let's say, almost 3 decades in seeing technology come in, internet, email, what have you, and then later on chat, and so it's always the same thing. What should we do with it? Now it's about blockchain, it's about crypto, it's about quantum, it's about all these things. Why do you need that? Well, the moment it's there, you will be able to do something with it, and then 5 to 10 years later, you ask yourself the question, how the hell did we do it without?
Yeah.
I can't even remember how you went from here to the south of France without a GPS. How the hell did we do that?
Yeah, all the maps and every sort
all
of
the maps,
prompts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You gave us a very concrete example of how you used text and AI to the sentimental analysis, for example. But is there maybe an example of another concrete project that you're working on that you're extremely proud of currently?
What we're extremely proud of is what we did in 2018. In 2018, a startup of 4 people called CFAR knocked on our door. And I said, hey, we're CFAR. We have technology to remotely operate a ship, a barge in our case. So no crew on board, but we can operate the ship. But we need a place to demonstrate our technology, and we need a ship. Okay. They must have sounded really convincing, because we gave them a 2.5 million euro vessel on one condition. The CEO is called Louis Robert. I said, Louis Robert, you have to find an insurance policy, because, he did. And he left the K-wall at the port house when we started the project with some press and so on. And then 3 months later, I hadn't heard anything of him. He sent me a WhatsApp message saying, we're sailing with your vessel from here in the remote control center, here in the beacon at the time, and the ship is 40 kilometers away. Okay. And I still remember that I asked Louis Robert, okay, what's the dream? And he said, well, if I'm able to have a government approval, because at the time in 2018, it was completely and utterly forbidden. There was no law that even allowed these things to happen. And so it was based upon us as Port Authority allowing it to happen in the Port Authority, but only as a pilot, as a proof of concept, as a test, not in an operational mode where we would be sailing around with these ships with cargo. And the dream was, because of the fact that we supported him and allowed him to demonstrate that technology worked, and also the Flemish waterway was behind it, that we would be able to motivate the government to make it happen by means of a legal framework by 2021. He got his approval in 2019 because of the fact that we as a port and also the Flemish waterway could go together to the government with the startup and say, well, you see it works, it's important it happens from a strategic perspective, so make it happen. So we facilitate, and we have done that since a couple of times, that we facilitate promising technology for which there is no legal framework to demonstrate that the technology is mature, and that we also are part as a local government to be involved, okay, what needs to happen in terms of safety and security, and then go to the government and say, well, adapt the laws accordingly. CFAR is now a company of over 30 people, and they have 10 boats in operation, so they sail for boat owners with cargo, from here all the way to Liège or all the way to the port of Bruges. And in the next few weeks, 10 new built boats will come into operation, built as autonomous vessels. So there is no steering hut or no location for a crew. It's a complete autonomous boat full of technology. And they're going to start sailing through the port as well. Okay. So that is something that happened in 5 years, from being science fiction, technology was there but no legal framework, into something which is in operation. And the company has, I think, at least 2 to 3 years head start on anybody else. In all the other countries around us, it's still in a pilot phase, and the government is thinking about the legislation. Here it's in operation. Okay, and that makes me very proud that we as a port platform become an innovation hub that allows technology to demonstrate the maturity, that it also allows them to speed up market adoption in 2 ways. First of all, okay, there are a couple of things I still need to get right. Like with drones, you can fly with a drone over a field and with 3 cows underneath. Okay, fine. But you can fly with a drone in a port where you have the largest chemical cluster of Europe, where you have moving objects called a ship, but sometimes 400 meters wide, 80 meters high, 60 meters wide. So dynamic geofencing, nobody thinks of that as a functionality in a drone until you're in a port and say, ooh, I need that. Okay. In facilitating that, they understand what still needs to be happening with their product or their solution before it's really safe, secure, and can be. And then finally, because they were able to do this at the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, it opens doors somewhere else around the world, because they have that credibility stamp. CFAR, the first ship owner, said, okay, we're going to invest in ships, because if the Port of Antwerp-Bruges allows this to happen, then we think the technology is ready for deployment. So, and those are the things we're really, really proud of, that we have taken that decision 4 or 5 years ago to invite promising technology. Of course, not all technology, but technology that have a certain potential in the port context, smart sensors, smart cameras, drones, automated ships, and so on, and to be able to drive their adoption forward.
Yeah.
That makes me proud. And then to see a startup of 4 people becoming a 30 people company, that's really cool.
That really sets the Port of Antwerp-Bruges apart from
Yeah,
anyone else.
yeah. Well, I think on a global scale, within the port ranking in terms of innovative ports, yeah,
For
we're
sure,
Olympic medal, Olympic medal.
We're already very curious about your talk at Future Entrepreneurship. Maybe to wrap it up, can you tell us briefly why we should definitely be present at this talk? And what can we expect from you during
My
the talk?
promo minute.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, the theme of this year is "The Future is You," and that really resonates pretty well with me in terms of my mental model. And I'm there to tell the story of what we have done in the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, not from a, let's say, the technology perspective, but how we went out with a vision to become something completely different, and how using this mindset of being a pioneer, we actually fill in the team being "The future is you," because it boils down to you as a person with a good, positive mindset. And then you have to start working on things, because it's hard work. Being an entrepreneur is hard work. Not that many people become overnight a billionaire by doing basically nothing. That's fairy tales. Yeah, there's a fairy tale. I was last week in a conference where Dries Buitaert, founder of Drupal, spoke, and he said, one of my key lessons learned is being an entrepreneur and setting up a business takes 10 years. And I think he's right. Okay.
Yeah.
To have actually a business worthwhile, well established, everything in place, good team, and so on and so on. That's something that takes time. It's like wine. You can drink it when it's young. You can wait until it matures, and then it's even better. That's even better. So that's something I really want to do, to encourage young people to see the opportunity behind the challenges, and to demonstrate how we have done it likewise in something that you would not necessarily consider to be an innovation hub, but a port is. And certainly a Port of Antwerp-Bruges, because it's the driving force behind everything that's relevant: sustainable economy, energy transition, battling climate change. That's the core at what we do.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it creates opportunities, because we saw that coming our way 5 years ago. We invested in it, and now everybody says you have to be here, because here it's where it's happening. So if you're early on and you want to be a pioneer, there are huge opportunities, because it's very clear what the next decades are going to be in terms of focus. It's just about grabbing it, your piece, and making it happen.
We can conclude that that maybe means what the future entails for you.
Yeah, of course.
Taking the opportunities that are there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Erwin, for joining us here today in the Future
My pleasure.
Studio. It was a great pleasure to have you here too. I'm already looking forward to your talk on future entrepreneurship. On the 19th of April,
Yes.
2023 it was.
At 7 o'clock.
At 7 o'clock, exactly. If you're watching this, don't forget to join us for the biggest edition thus far. Joining us for the 7th edition in Waagnatie with more than 20 different speakers, 2 stages and lots of networking opportunities. Register for free as a student or grab your ticket at thefuture.be. See you there on the 19th and 20th of April. Cheers.